Welcome to Season 2. We start off this season with a special guest, Maestro Eiki Isomura. Eiki is the artistic and interim general director of Opera in the Heights in Houston, and I have had the privilege of working with him on several productions there. He talks about growing up around music, on belonging, and being a parent while he and his wife have full schedules. I'm excited to share his perspective. Please welcome Eiki Isomura. Welcome to Wear Yellow Proudly Through Our Lens, Conversations with Asians and Asian Americans. I am your host, Julia Sanchez. Hi everybody, welcome back to this episode of Wear Yellow Proudly Through Our Lens. My name is Julia Sanchez and I'll be your host. With me today is Eiki Isomura, and I'm very, very excited to have Eiki because we've worked together for years and he's somebody that I've been wanting to bring on this podcast for a while. Eiki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Eiki Isomura. I'm artistic and general director at Opera in the Heights, and I'm a conductor. We produce typically 3 to 4 productions here in the Houston Heights, which gives the company its name. And then I also keep some guest conducting gigs on my calendar throughout the year. And so, yeah, it's been a fun ride.
That is so fantastic. Can I ask how you got yourself into conducting and how you got into music in general?
Sure, yeah. I'll start with the beginning. I was born into a very musical family. My father is the founding violist of the Tokyo String Quartet, which is one of the finest chamber music ensembles in the world, playing well over 100 concerts a year for 40 plus years. An incredible legacy they've left in classical music. And so I grew up around a lot of string quartet playing. Haydn and Beethoven and Schubert were playing in my house all the time. And I also have 2 uncles who were full-time orchestra musicians. And so I definitely had some inkling of what classical music careers were like. Certainly my perspective was from a family member, watching from afar. And so my father's career was so from another galaxy that it wasn't one that I could personally relate to so much. Coming up, I started piano lessons when I was age 5, but not what I understood to be a professional track, as someone who showed a lot of promise as a concert pianist or anything like that.
What do you mean by a different galaxy?
So what I mean is that just understanding that my father was playing in the most prestigious concert halls in the world, all the time in Europe and North America and in Asia, and just a truly stellar career. And some of their collaborators, if they're playing a quintet or say, it's just some of the finest solo instrumentalists in the world. And
your instrument was primarily,
my
when you were
instrument
younger,
was piano.
was piano. Okay,
yeah. And then piano had always been just part of what I did. I didn't self-identify as a young musician so much, though piano was always there. I think what it took was singing in choirs, being not just one person in a room practicing, but actually making music as part of
as a collective,
as a collective that got me to realize that music is about being part of something bigger. And that was an aha moment. And I think pursuing conducting sort of started out as a form of hero worship. I wanted to be just like my high school choir director. And so I think that was sort of my initial picture of what a life in music could be like. And so from there on, it was about getting into music school, and so piano became very important from that point on. And so there was a sort of a switch of gears there, right around high school.
Where did you grow up primarily, and when did you?
I grew up in New York City.
Okay. What? I did not know that.
Yeah.
What? That is so cool.
So yeah, my father's quartet, even though they called themselves the Tokyo String Quartet, they were a New York-based ensemble.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in New York City, and I then went to Michigan, where I started my my undergraduate training at University of Michigan, and Ann Arbor sort of became my second home, where I over the course of 2 degrees, I spent 9 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and that's where I was just before I moved to Houston.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and it was a teaching job that brought me to Houston. Lone Star College Montgomery was looking for an orchestra conductor who could build a program there, and I definitely was excited about the prospect of working in a city like Houston. I didn't know, I had no idea that I would be working in opera most of the time, just a few years thereafter. It started out with primarily a job that had to do with teaching music at all levels and recruiting for orchestra program. And I got I got involved with some projects at Houston Grand Opera, HGO Co. Through their Song of Houston initiative. They were doing some pieces that told AAPI stories, and I was fortunate enough to be brought on the music staff for those projects, and then I was fortunate enough to work at Opera in the Heights on a couple of productions as an interim conductor, and from there on, I've been brought on full time. So, and I'm not teaching anymore at the college level anyway, and so that's something that brought me to Houston, and I hope to someday get back into, but these days it's all Opera in the Heights.
Did you ever envision yourself being in Houston for this long?
So I didn't. When my wife and I first moved to Houston, we had just gotten engaged, and we were very excited about Houston, but I think we had imagined it would be maybe 5 years, and then keeping our eyes open for other opportunities. My wife is a fantastic opera singer, holds her doctorate in vocal performance, and we'd always been looking for opportunities to perform and teach together, and so Houston turned out to become our musical home for a long time. This is now our 11th or 12th year in Houston.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
First came here in August of 2012.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh my goodness. So in going into opera, you said you didn't think that you would be going into opera in general, and then you started getting more opportunities there.
Wanted to. Oh yeah. I did my I guess you could say, terminal degree, my DMA in orchestral conducting.
Right.
And certainly I was absolutely in love with the symphonic repertoire, but I always knew, if I was being honest with myself, that my heart was in musical storytelling that involved singers, that involved librettos, or even orchestral song literature like Mahler and things that formed some of my dissertation recital stuff. And I had been saying, I think, as a grad student, that I would love to have a life in opera, but I knew that that was a path that was going to take sort of, I think, a different road than I had been taking to that point. I was very much on a track of the young orchestral conductor who was expected to cut their teeth as an assistant conductor with an American Symphony Orchestra, serving as a cover conductor for, subscription concerts and doing outreach concerts
Like that path.
or pops programs and things like that. And most of my colleagues in my grad school studies did that. I went immediately into academia, and then just things worked out that I was working on new opera projects through HGO and then standard literature projects through Opera in the Heights.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
Do you ever miss teaching? Because it seems like you do.
I do. I think it's my true calling.
I think so.
And I very much miss the classroom experience, and I was so inspired by students and their enthusiasm that is very pure. They're not jaded with the world yet, and they're just discovering music and all of its wonder through very fresh eyes. And I found that to be just always energizing. And they haven't really thought about the rigors of the industry and all of the the hundreds of rejections and disappointments and blah blah blah, all the discouragement that might lie ahead, and they're just there to learn craft and engage with repertoire that we've lived with for decades now, but they're experiencing for the first time, and see them experiencing this literature for the first time is super exciting. And I do hope to get back to that.
Yeah. I feel like I've been in academia in terms of working in some academic settings lately, and I still the rest of my season kind of comprises of some of that, continuing some of that, and there is some level of naivete about it that is so refreshing, and not even in a negative connotation, but it's this. Buck Ross was telling me about this. It's always that aha moment in the room, especially in a rehearsal where we all share that. We all understand it. We've all been there. And I've always appreciated that, because it's this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like this is what we're doing, and we're creating art, we're creating music. And it's just like this very shared feeling that is unspoken in a lot of ways, but I've always appreciated that in that way.
Yeah. And you just reminded me of this a Japanese proverb that every Japanese person knows. It's shoshin wa suru bekarazu, and it's like, don't forget the heart you had as a beginner when you were experiencing things for the first time, the sort of commitment you had to it, the enthusiasm you had for it, and sort of a mindfulness of the basics that got you through the first trials, that when you remind yourself of where you were, what your heart was like at the beginning stages, then perhaps you can get through challenges farther down the road, and maybe get through burnout and things like that. Right.
Oh my god. Oh, that's so beautiful. I've never known that. That is so rad. Going into that, so your Asian identity is Japanese.
Yeah. So identity,
were you born here?
Complex question for everyone. For me, I was born here, New York City, Japanese parents, Japanese immigrants who came to the States for their artistic career paths. My father came to the United States to study at Juilliard, and eventually made New York his artistic home. And my mother worked in the fashion industry, and so New York was also the place to be.
Oh my god. Yeah.
It was sort of the center of the world for both of those disciplines, and so it made sense for them to be based there and have their kids. And so I was very fortunate that my parents were really committed to giving me every opportunity, giving me and my older brother, every opportunity to experience and appreciate and be in love with Japanese things. So we went to Japan every year to see our relatives over the summer. We went to Japanese supplementary school on Saturdays from K through 12. And there was this amazing summer camp for Japanese speakers up in the Catskill Mountains. It's a YMCA camp called Tokyo Frost Valley YMCA Partnership. And it was this like life-changing thing that we did for, I did it for 8 summers, my brother probably 2. And so my brother and I very much felt Japanese American. But what that meant for us in particular was that we got to feel both 100% American and 100% Japanese, just depending on the context. And so I thought, based on all the conversations I've had with my contemporaries who went to those schools, went to those camps, and
fellow Japanese contemporaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those who self-identified as Japanese Americans. All of us had some struggle with this question of like, what am I? Am I American? I don't really seem that American sometimes, and I don't seem like I'm ever Japanese enough for anyone. And I self-identify as a product of the 80s, and kind of came of age through the 90s. And during that time in New York, there was a big influx of Japanese families who made New York and New Jersey their temporary home just for work stuff. And many families were planning on moving back to Japan. And so I was amidst this community of Japanese Americans who were either going to stick it out in the States, or perhaps eventually move back to Japan, and had to be prepared for either. And so there were kids who took their Japanese studies super seriously, way more than I did, because they knew they would have to hit the ground running when they moved back to Japan and enter that school system. Whereas I always knew, my brother and I always knew we would go to American colleges and probably base our careers here. And so we definitely took our Japanese studies seriously, but it didn't feel like, oh man, if I don't, I won't get into a certain school or blah, blah, blah. And so, but there was so much immersion in the culture that we got to feel like we could claim both, rather than feeling like we were stuck somewhere in the middle. I can't say that has stayed that way. I think as we've gotten older, Japan has become sort of less accessible to us now that we're, we have families of our own, we're raising them here in the States, and like visiting Japan is a big deal. COVID made it impossible for a long time. And so, I have a younger son who's already 3 and has never been to Japan, has never met his mother, his grandmother rather. And so, yeah, I feel a little less Japanese these days.
It's like a certain level of disconnect
compared to how I grew up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in a way, Japanese was my mother tongue, in that we spoke it at home. It was the first language I learned, and then English is my stronger language now. But yeah, I think my brother and I we pride ourselves on speaking at a native level, and trying to raise our kids the same way. It's harder.
We were just talking about this before we started rolling. Can you elaborate more on that? Because I know that you're trying to be in a bilingual home with your wife, and Japanese and English. And how's it going? I know it's been a bit of a struggle in terms of keeping it, and I know that at least from experience for me, immersion is such a huge important part of it, to where if you're not continuously immersed in the language, either learning it or continuing to comprehend, you start to lose it a little bit, or at least it's harder to maintain.
Yeah. So our approach so far has been one parent, one language, meaning my wife, Monica, who could probably learn Japanese in pretty quick order. She's very gifted with languages, but we consciously made the choice that she would speak exclusively English to the kids, and that I would speak exclusively Japanese, to kind of, I guess the theory is that you establish certain pathways and compartmentalization in the brain so that the kids associate one language with one parent and sort of encodes all of that information so that it sticks. It has not gone so well, and there's lots of resistance there, and I'm just learning every day that it's all good. It's all wonderful if they want to speak English back to me. That's great. It's not like a failure on anyone's part. Right. I just want like their Japanese experience to be a joyful one, not one that is this sort of
pressed onto them.
Yeah, the source of pressure and obligation, and something that if they were to fail to somehow perform, that they would be judged in any way, made to feel less. No, I just want them to love every part of their life that has anything to do with Japan, and unfortunately Japan is a very far away concept for them right now because we haven't been there since 2019. Right.
Edison's been
he's been to Japan twice. Okay. But again, it was 4 years ago. So, it's amazing that he remembers as much as he does. But yeah, little Aiden, who's 3, we'll make a trip in 2024 finally. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, but I just been thinking about Japanese heritage and how like my parents really busted their butts to make sure I could self-identify as a Japanese person, and gave me and my brother every opportunity. I just think what I can do is try to do the same, and if that's something that they take to, that they're excited about, that gives them joy, then awesome. If it's something that they just can't quite relate to, I have to say like, hey, that's like they're building their identity too, as half Japanese American, and only they can discover what any of that means. Right.
And there's like in literally like the early infancy of being in school as well, which I'm sure is like another factor of
there's that, and there's the whole why
foreign exactly. Going into school.
Yeah. All of that is foreign to them. So, seeing through their eyes, I can't even imagine. But, like I said, just want their heritage to be something that brings them joy, and something that eventually will be a source of pride for them.
If you don't mind me asking, was that level of pressure, I don't know if that's the right word for it, is that something that was instilled in you and your brother when you were growing up, or that level of identifying as Japanese, was that something that was that your parents put onto you, or is that something that you're growing up in America and you are continuously immersed in American culture? Was that something that you guys experienced growing up?
I think there was pressure that came not so much through parenting, but through just putting us in various contexts, whether it's taking us to Japan to visit the grandparents. That's a certain form of pressure. Putting us through the supplementary Japanese schools. We were always presented with a bar that we were either going to meet or not. And in many ways, we kind of grew up feeling like we were exceeding the bar. In a way, maybe that wasn't so pressure filled,
That's good.
So I don't know how my parents did it, but they figured out a right balance for
Sure,
us. And also, it takes a village. Our
Right.
extended relatives all played a big part in all of that.
Right, right.
My dad was traveling a lot. And so we had sometimes, my maternal grandmother would come and live with us in New York for weeks at a time. I had a cousin who would come in and help anytime that my parents were not around, because they were both working both in Japan and all over the world. So
Right.
it took everyone to help us feel Japanese.
And I think it goes back to the whole immersion aspect of it, where you said going to school and also camps and also being immersed amongst people that do speak it and are part of that culture, and continuously going back every year as well. It made it, I'm sure, easier, a bit of a no-brainer to be a part of that and to continue. And I think as you know, like, language is such a huge part of it, to where, like, learning that aspect of it is just a huge part of the battle, and just communicating and understanding the language, I feel.
And I just want to acknowledge that I had a very privileged upbringing that enabled all of that, that my parents were in the position to fly us out to Japan as often as they did, or putting us through those summer camps and Saturday schools and things like that. I'm trying to fathom now as a parent, how are we going to provide that for our kids? Certainly the trips to Japan are kind of long shot these days.
I cannot imagine.
Just quadruple round trip fare and blah blah blah.
Yeah, for me too. I'm just like, oh, I wonder how much a trip to the Philippines would be, and then going to the thousands just for one ticket, and I'm just like, never mind. Even on and surprisingly, the off season for the Philippines is the summertime, and and that's usually the times that we have gone. I've only gone back twice since we immigrated, but you'd think it'd be cheaper, or at least, it is cheaper. It's in the low, maybe $1,100-$1,200, but for one person that is still a lot of money. And then going into what would be the shoulder, or the high season for them is $17,000-$18,000, and I'm just like, how do people afford this? And sure, inflation, but also in general, I'm just like, you know what? We will take a trip to Europe that is oddly cheaper. And I don't know if it's distance or what, but it's becoming inaccessible in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. And so we kind of, certainly as parents, we're just doing our best and trying to make Japan part of their lives.
For you, how has your experience been being in this industry, being in your positions, being an Asian American person that's done all this? How has that been for you in your journey?
Yeah, I would say that my experience has been different depending on the context. In my position as an artistic director, a general director of an opera company, it certainly has felt lonely at times. I'm usually the only Asian face in the room for board meetings or conference calls for general directors of budget for the monthly call that Opera America arranges, or various committees and panels. I'm typically called upon to be the AAPI voice in the room, and that is an exhausting experience, honestly. I'm grateful for it. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. It's an honor and a privilege, but it's also a responsibility that I don't always know what to do with, if I'm being perfectly candid, because I think the implicit ask is, can you serve as the voice for the AAPI community in this conversation, and
putting all that burden, pressure, not burden rather, but all the voices of AAPI community that is in opera on your voice.
I am one person with just one set of experiences, and
amongst the broad spectrum of
infinitely broad
Asians,
spectrum of infinite experiences of an infinitely diverse community, and so it's an impossible task, and so I'm often approached to be put into that seat, and I definitely have colleagues who have taken that seat and have used that platform to great ends, and I'm inspired by them, and I'm always working to be a better advocate and representative, and someone who can serve our community as best I can, but again, I am one person. The AAPI community is not a monolith, and I think folks understand that, and tell us that they understand that, but it's not always apparent in what it looks like in action. Right. At the end of the day, it's usually a panel discussion. Absolutely. and it's lonely.
Yeah.
So that's one part. I said that it depends on the context. So as I don't know, so as the head of a company, it can feel that way. As a guest conductor, it usually feels very different. The projects that I'm typically invited to conduct, majority are operas that have AAPI characters, and AAPI creators, which is and AAPI artists, casts, and it's always an energizing experience to work with folks who can relate and bring their unique experiences, and we get to take part in telling these stories. But you and I know, and we've talked about this off camera, that it can be a sort of a double-edged sword, perhaps. That there's always this creeping, inescapable feeling of being pigeonholed, perhaps, and that this question in the back of our minds, like, is this going to be the lion's share of our work moving forward, to sort of be a solution to a representation problem for a project. And so I take all of that, and I try to focus on what we're able to bring to each experience. Working on right now a production of a new piece that HGO has commissioned and is co-presenting with Asia Society Texas Center. It's The Big Swim, which tells the story of the lunar zodiac animals and the Great Race. And that's been a really joyful experience working with an all-Asian cast and creative team. And I was telling you, it feels very refreshing, because it's the first time that I've worked on a project like this that isn't about trauma.
Right.
That it's actually this expression of joy, of celebrating Lunar New Year. The whole piece is just full of festive spirit, and all these animals get to run around and make crazy animal noises, and how fun is that? And the traumatic stories of AAPI communities, those need to be told too. I think we're all hungry for those sort of joyous spaces for us to come together.
Another part of representation that you mentioned is seeing Asian faces in different roles. Can you elaborate more on that?
This thing that AAPI artists and BIPOC artists are up against all the time is this threat of pigeonholing. The easiest way perhaps to counteract that is to cast BIPOC artists in roles that are not specifically BIPOC, and that's why I'm especially proud to have conducted my first Tosca at Opera Orlando. I have a butterfly on my calendar. I recently did An American Dream. I have The Big Swim coming up in February, which I'm super excited about. And those are all different forms of my representing the AAPI community. And when I'm serving an AAPI story, it means one thing, and when it's, say, Tosca, I think that's a form of representation that is unfortunately the rarest. And if we saw more of it, then perhaps we would go beyond merely representing, and we would actually arrive at belonging.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like the concept of belonging is obviously so different from representing. Is that sure, like we are representing all these different people, but also belonging is being settled and actually being a part of it. I had never thought of it that way, and actually that's a very profound thing of shedding that light into that. Wow.
I think the reality is that projects that are driven by AAPI characters and creators and tell AAPI stories, at this stage in our industry's history, it's still very much marginalized projects for marginalized audiences, and the meat and potatoes of any company's season is the Toscas, and for me it meant a great deal that for Opera Orlando to have brought in a Japanese conductor for not Butterfly but Tosca, that it was something on their main stage rather than a piece that was more part of their community engagement efforts. And so I think I just want to acknowledge it when it's happening, and that it makes a big difference. There were definitely a few kids of Asian descent in that Tosca children's chorus.
Wow.
And to see that I was in the pit leading the show, I know meant something to him, because he made a point to approach me afterwards and said, hey, good job.
That's fantastic.
So I know that my being put in that position, I feel pretty good about it. I think he felt more like he belonged in that space.
Yeah.
Because the conductor looked like him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
no, it's still blowing my mind with what you said about belonging. No, I think that's very important. Yes, like you said, like those other stories, yes, of course, they're very important, and we do identify as those, and they're very important stories to tell. But also going beyond that and being a part of that is, like you said, it's going into that aspect of belonging, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I want to also put it out there that all forms of representation are helping us move forward. I am making note of, though, is that there are projects that are or I guess forms of representation that are rarer than others.
I know we mentioned parenting a little bit before this as well, and going into that for a little bit. Please don't read too much into this and what I'm about to say, but I think you're actually the first parent that I've had on the podcast, which is really nice. How does that factor into what you do, into your own identity now? Because like obviously, like aside from obviously being a Japanese American conductor and artistic director, how does that being a father as well and a husband are as part of your identity? How does that factor into all of this? That is
thank you so much for creating an opportunity to kind of unpack that. So certainly becoming a parent has recontextualized everything for me in terms of what my work means. My work now means I'm away from my kids. It didn't used to mean that work was just work. And so now there is this aspect of sacrifice, and so the work-life balance equation starts to feel not so much like a balance anymore. Something I've been saying to other friends is that I don't believe that work-life balance really exists. It's this concept, this like framework that we use to kind of talk about how we can live more healthily. But I think the truth is for musicians and theater professionals and all of us in this industry is that because the work opportunities are so scarce, life has had to be subservient to the work. And so what kind of balance is really possible when one is 100% predicated on the other, right? And so I think once you are caring for small children who depend on you this way, I start to reevaluate work-life balance, and I would prefer to think of work being subservient to the shape that our life takes.
Yeah, as it should be.
But I think we condition ourselves in the earlier stages of our training and our career for it to be, the life has to fit into the work. And so there's this new learning curve that happens, I think, for folks who are working and building a family. And so I guess what it means for me is that I am especially grateful to be doing most of my work in the same city that I live. Opera in the Heights allows me to do that. And it also means that with guest conducting opportunities that, I have to be choosy, and that the ones that I do take have to be, planned to a T. It definitely takes a kind of support system that, I certainly feel that in Houston, it can be a little tricky being from the East Coast, both me and Monica. Monica's family all being in Philadelphia, and my family, my parents having moved back to Japan. So it's tricky. I know some folks who are making it work, and it feels like a miracle when it happens.
The pieces fit together.
When the pieces fit together, exactly.
Right.
But thanks for asking that. I think it's a difficult industry. It's a difficult art form that is not so accommodating for families, because the nature of the project requires you to usually be away from home for about 4 weeks.
And the hours as well.
Yeah, and so I certainly know that singers and conductors they especially enjoy concert work versus stage work because it's so short. Usually pays just as well.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's that's something I keep my eyes open for as well. But yeah, opera does take a lot of time away from home, as you know better than most.
Sure, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't know. I think that especially at that age, I feel it's such a, like they're formative years, and again, like your kids are just starting out school and stuff too, and with you and Monica as well being in like well into your careers as well, it's such a, being present and being as much as you can be there for them is I'm sure it's a huge difference, and it's a huge balance, like you said.
Can I share one project that's coming up?
Of course.
Josh Shaw at Pacific Opera Project is mounting his bilingual Japanese-English Madame Butterfly again in Los Angeles, in Little Tokyo at the Artani Theater. That's coming up in June. And he is somehow willing to fly my entire nuclear family, my Monica and Edison and Aiden.
Yeah.
Monica will be playing Kate Pinkerton.
Oh my gosh!
And Edison and Aiden will, I guess, be sharing the role of Sorrow.
Yeah.
Whichever one takes to it better and is willing to sit still when they're supposed to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh!
And follow direction. So the Isomuras are all shipping out to LA for that
That is
production.
So great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very rare thing. So yeah. Shout out to Naina Yoshida Nelson. I know she's done this, so I'll be asking her for some tips. But that should give a new twist to the work-life balance situation.
And I know that like Pop's schedule does usually like go into June,
into the summer,
which is really nice because Butterfly being then is actually perfect because I'm sure Monica and you and the kids don't have their seasons and the school year as well, and so I feel like it being in June, I feel like is like a perfect opportunity, especially for the four of you as well. So that's actually I feel like a recipe for at least you'll be together, you'll be in production, but and working together as well.
It's really the only way it could have worked was for it to be.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh! Yay! That's so exciting. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we sign out?
I just want to give you kudos for creating this podcast and for it being as a personal conversation as it has been. So often these conversations have to do with the ills of our industry, and we focus on things that that we need to fix, and let's put our heads together. But it was nice to get to kind of talk about my personal experiences, and it was really refreshing. Thank you. This industry is it's an industry, but it's really a collection of individuals.
Yeah, of course.
And so I think you're recognizing that and giving us an opportunity to kind of fill out the picture for all of us.
Thank you. That means so much. I've always harped on about this, and I'm not necessarily getting tired of it, but it's always a celebration of us, of people that are of people, sure, of course, like that come from different countries, and that's incredibly important, but also like again, like being a father and being the head of a company as well, and being a conductor, I've appreciated having people that are multifaceted, but also have these different experiences, because I don't know who listens, I don't know who is out there, but also there are people that have these similar experiences, and it means so much that you're here. I've always admired you, and I've always appreciated working with you, and so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Elias. I've always admired you too, and it's been really fun.
Thank you.
Folks,
thank you so much for listening in on this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Can I give you a hug?
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. We release episodes every 3rd and 5th Tuesday of every month. If you enjoyed this one, please like, comment, share, subscribe, or follow. If you'd like to join us for future episodes, reach out to wearyellowproudly@gmail.com. Once again, this is Wear Yellow Proudly's Through Our Lens, conversations with Asians and Asian Americans. I'm your host, Julia Sanchez, and we will see you on the next episode.